Whoa. Because I'm eating a Snickers bar doesn't mean you should be eating Snickers bars, all right? When you understand nutrition, you understand what your body needs, what you need to feed it, then you can choose any food you want to do that and be okay with any potential negative consequences or the positives or whatever. People literally struggle their whole lives trying to get a handle on their eating, and some end up blind or with body parts amputated. Full stop. If it's doing something to your guts, you just shouldn't eat it, right? You have to prioritize your gut health. It is super critical. Carbohydrates aren't essential. They're critical, meaning if you don't have any in your bloodstream, you're dead. Your brain doesn't function without them. Ever. The entire time you're here. I'm fired up about this because we got to add more nuance and more intelligence to our thinking. Hello. How y'all doing out there? Yeah. It's showtime. Just another day in paradise. Another day to crack open a liquid death. Still waiting on an email from these guys like, yeah, podcast is killing it. We want to give you, we want to give you liquid death. It's good water. Smooth, I don't like my water to be unsmooth. You know what I'm talking about if you're a water connoisseur. Episode 26, we're going to read the article, the latest blog article on Substack. Is a Snickers bad for you? 3/25/25, that is the date. Turn those down. Yeah. Goal of this episode is to give you the audio version with special commentary. That's pretty amazing. And cover the article and explore whether a Snickers is bad for you and have some fun. So if you listen to the other one, what was the other article on? Oh my God, I don't even remember the title. Sure, it'll come back to me. But if you listen to the previous podcast, so what I do is I read and then I go off on a tangent. And we're definitely going off on tangents today because this is one of those days. Outline of topics. We got there's only three things. We got updates. We're going to go to the article. There's not even anything beforehand. And then some final thoughts. And I actually typed out some final thoughts. I basically started writing instead of like typically you guys don't see this, but on these little notes here, it's just like a bullet point and then indicates to me what it is I wanted to talk about at that point. That way hopefully I put together a coherent thought and I'm not just rambling. But I ramble and it's rambled in some sort of logical order. But today I started to type the final thoughts. And so I had a few things I wanted to say with some clarity. And so that'll be the plan. A little side update before I get to the actual updates. If you remember, we did the podcast with Taylor, the type 1 diabetic. That's not what she is, but that's kind of the condition that she has. She's a human. Pretty cool one, too. But we did that podcast, and it got me thinking about my blood glucose because back in the day when I was testing it a lot, I tested it, finger prick, not a CGM like we talked about, but finger prick. I'd check it in the morning, and I'd check it sometimes during the day, and I'd check it in the evening just to see what was going on. It was really stable is what I came to conclude after like 18 months of doing that. And so I stopped, but this was back in like 2002 when I was doing that. And so after the podcast, I started to think about like, man, I don't really know what it's doing anymore. And so I tested it one day randomly, checked it in the morning, and it was like 103 on fasting. I'm like, see? It's been creeping back up. It's my metabolism's maybe getting off again. Then later that day, I checked it, and I hadn't eaten very much. I had my normal breakfast, and so I had my normal breakfast around 9, and then this would have been, it's like 3 in the afternoon. I started taking notes. It was like 3 in the afternoon, and I had a double shot of espresso, no big deal, and a protein shake. About a couple hours prior to me taking it again, about 3. I had that stuff about 1. And my blood glucose was 155, and I'm like, dang it. My blood sugars are off again. My metabolism isn't running well. It's starting to get elevated. I ate a normal meal, checked it again a few hours later, still at 153. Like, oh my God, it's staying elevated. And I checked it that evening, and I don't remember what the number was. It was like, I think it was still over 100 or high 90s or something like that. I'm like, here we go. I got problems. And so that night I put a plan. I got the whole plan laid out. I was going to do like the basic, I was going to take my blood work, my blood glucose for 2 weeks just to set the baseline. I was going to start with TRE. I was going to start with a 10-hour window and cut it down to an 8-hour window and see if that got my blood sugar regulated again. If that didn't work, I was going to move on to fasting 1 day and 3 days and 5-day fasting. I was going to fix my blood glucose live for everybody. But the next day I woke up and I took it and it was like 89. And then I intentionally ate a whole bunch of rice, ate white rice with eggs and butter and some beef. And I had like 105 grams of carbohydrate from white rice. And I checked my blood glucose at 45 minutes. And when it went from like the morning, it was like I said, 89. It went to 98. And then it went to 105. And that's as high as it got. I'm like, I guess I don't have anything to talk about. I was going to like clip it. The plan was to clip these updates before the podcast and then actually cut them out and put them on as a separate video on the YouTube channel there. And also probably in the like the Apple Podcast and all that stuff, but that's not happening. It's working. My blood glucose is fine. I literally ate 100 grams of carbohydrate and my blood sugars didn't go anywhere. So I guess I should be happy about that, but I'm a little sad because I was excited to have something to talk about other than the stuff that I'm already talking about. Anyways, so there's an update before the updates. All right, let's get into these updates. Michigan and Michigan State basketball are in the Sweet 16. That's cool. I'm not super excited, but hey, it's cool. I watched golf again. Golf is like whatever. It's what I do on Sunday when I get home from the coffee shop because I got to eat a salad and have some food, and I want to stare at the TV when I do that or look at something. And that's what's on. And it's calming. Watching golf is very calming. Some golf naps are amazing. Golf is on in the TV and you're napping. That's amazing. The weather is currently undecided. It's not deciding on anything. It's like sunny and then it's cold and then it's raining and then maybe we get some drizzles and then we get like some snow rain mix. Soon it'll be consistently sunny though. Subscriber updates, 0 change. This will be the first time since we started this, that nothing has moved. Not an out, not one thing. Email, 62, YouTube, 109, Spotify, 25, Apple, 22. Not one of those things moved. And we're going to be making some changes to that because it is too much. And with stuff going on at the gym, it is too much to try and keep all this thing moving, man. I'll tell you. But the podcast is going to carry on and the blogging, because I really enjoy the blogging. And the podcast is fun. Reminder, please submit your questions to dennis@dennisfinish.com. And I can answer those questions. And here's what time it is. It's time to go to the article. So let's get into this. Nope. No. I don't know my buttons anymore. Top right, man. Golly, where's my cheat sheet? It's a little too late in the game. It's too late in the game to be blowing the buttons. I'll tell you that right now. All right. Okay, so we are going to read this article and then make commentary. This was inspired because I said something about Snickers bars on a podcast, and I heard people saying, got to get the glasses. I heard people saying it was like a license to eat a Snickers bar. And I was like, whoa. Because I'm eating a Snickers bar doesn't mean you should be eating Snickers bars, all right? And so that's what kind of sparked this. It's at one point I started going down the road of explaining, and I'll probably just do that in the podcast. Like, okay, your glycogen levels and energy, positive energy balance, negative energy balance. And it was getting too, I don't want to say technical, but it was really lengthening the article, and I didn't want this to be a big, long, in-depth article. So I put that to the side, save that for another piece that I'll write about. But this was just simple. I just wanted to give some context, okay? Because if people are going to eat a Snickers after they work out or they think a Snickers is appropriate for them in their diet, well, you're going to want to make sure that it fits into a certain context, all right? And that's basically what this article covered. So, without any further ado, let's get into the article. Do I always hit those buttons the same? Is a Snickers bad for you? Question mark. Most people read that title and think, what a dumb question. Of course a Snickers is bad for you. Everyone knows that. Maybe you thought the same thing, and that's why you clicked on the link. When you ask this question in person, it typically accompanies a funny look and a similar response. It's just not what healthy, in quotations, people would eat. There's one question that comes to mind that can help elucidate, potentially, how this thinking is somewhat limiting. Is a Snickers bad for you if you are starving to death? And this is a question that I ask people when they get perplexed. I'm not reading anymore if you're listening. Commentary. This is a question that I always ask when people get perplexed when they see me in a Snickers bar, because everybody knows a Snickers is bad for you. Candy's bad for you. You know, these foods in these categories are bad for you. But without context, right? Like if you're starving to death, it's not bad for you. I mean, this is pretty obvious. And so once you get that thinking in your head, hopefully it jars you out of this good food, bad food system of thinking that people have for eating. And it starts to help open up the door to, hey, maybe I need to be a little bit more nuanced. All right, back to the article. Well, the obvious answer and the correct one is no. In that situation, it is life-saving nutrition. So how can that be? How can all the information we hear say unequivocally that a Snickers is bad and unhealthy and then somehow, from a different perspective, be good? One word, context. But before we get into that one amazing word, let's give some more sounds like... I just can't believe I put this in here because it's so cheesy. I don't know if I can do it justice here. So basically I say, all right, I'll read and I'll say what I have here if it makes any sense. But before we get into that one amazing word, let's give some more. And then in parentheses, I have sounds like s'mores. I don't know. Get it? Because I said some more, and some more sounds like s'mores. Anyways, examples of when a Snickers bar is not necessarily bad for you. What if you've been in a calorie deficit for months? Semi-starved, you might say. What if you are absolutely spent from exercise? Like just ran a marathon spent, or 90 minutes of hot yoga spent? What if you're a 240-pound bodybuilder or a 140-pound bodybuilder trying to put on muscle? How about if you eat a Snickers with a salad and a giant steak? Are they bad for you then? Now, I'm not challenging conventional thing because it's fun, but it is kind of fun, but because it needs to be challenged. We are not thinking intelligently or accurately enough about nutrition. Our thinking is too simple. People literally struggle their whole lives trying to get a handle on their eating, and some end up blind or with body parts amputated. Break from the article. And this is one of the things that is really, how do I articulate this? Like when I think about me and how I think about food, I can't imagine how somebody can that can happen to somebody. It's not a judgment. It's a, how can we communicate in a way to that person that helps them start to gain control over their physiology, which is what this basically is, right? Like, generally speaking, your physiology wants to go take in calories all the time because that's just the environment. It grew up in an environment where that wasn't a possibility, and when calories were available, it needed to get them, okay? That's the common thinking or theory. So how is it that I or millions of other people don't have that challenge and some other people do? What is it they're thinking about? Why? How can we start to think about nutrition in a way and educate our children in a way that they don't get stuck in that nightmare of a situation, right? Like literally can't stop yourself from doing something, even though you know these are the potential outcomes. It needs to be fixed. And like, it drives me nuts. Drives me nuts. All right, back to the article. Blind or with body parts amputated. Simply labeling foods as good or bad is insufficient. We need to raise our level of understanding of nutrition if we want to raise our level of health. We need to teach and talk about what nutrition really is, feeding our bodies, not labeling foods like Snickers as good or bad. Simplistic concepts help, but they do not inform. There is an old proverb that says people perish because of a lack of knowledge. I think that is part of what we are experiencing, and I do. I do think that is part of what we are experiencing. There's a disconnect between nutrition or eating and how it's affecting our physiology, right? We grow up with the mindset of, I used to ask this to my clients, what is it that you ask yourself when you go to eat something? What looks good? What sounds good? The question you're asking yourself is, what's going to satisfy my taste buds? What's going to give me pleasure? Okay, wrong question. Just straight off the top, that is not going to yield the result that you're looking for if feeding yourself good nutrition and maintaining good health over your lifespan is your goal, okay? If your only goal is to feed your taste buds, get pleasure out of food, well, you got the right question. We need to change the question to, what does my body need? What are the nutrients? What are the macronutrients or the micronutrients or whatever it is? Basically, those three things, I'll talk about this at the end, that we need to be consuming to ensure that we're feeding our body what it needs. We need to change the question. And that comes through education. So back to the article. So let's add some context to our thinking about Snickers consumption if you were to choose to consume one and maybe even be able to do so without feeling guilty about it. Okay, so we kind of set it up, and then we're going to go into add some context to start to help us better understand when would be a good time or an appropriate time or an okay time to eat a Snickers, other than if you were starving to death. It's pretty evident there. Next little section here has got a little subtitle called Context, Context, Context. In the examples above, we kept changing the context in which a Snickers is eaten. The Snickers stays constant, but everything around it changes. This influences how our bodies respond because context matters. There are 4 major ways that it does, which we can consider in no particular order. The first one is the amount, which is easy to understand. 1 Snickers or 10. Half a Snickers or the whole thing. A piece of cake spread over the week or in 5 minutes. The poison is in the dose always, right? Okay, so the underlying, which I didn't dig into because, again, I was going to expand the article too much, was, the underlying issue that people have with the Snickers bar is the sugar, right? Everybody knows sugar's bad for you. Okay, well, how much? Is 1 gram bad? Is 10 grams bad? Or is it 100 grams? If you're a 400-pound dude with 300 pounds of muscle or 200 pounds of muscle and you could store 500 grams of carbohydrate and you've only eaten 200 that day, is 100 grams of sugar going to be bad in that situation? This is what I didn't get into, was we all have this capacity to store glycogen in your muscles and in your liver. Generally speaking, 200 to 300 grams if you're at a normal weight, okay? So if you're only eating 100 grams of carbohydrates a day, is it okay to have 100 grams of sugar if it's spread out during the day? Probably not one dose. You'd probably feel a little funny if you didn't eat any carbohydrate except for the sugar and it was 100 grams. Would that be okay? These are the questions that aren't answered. If you're super active, is it okay then? These are the questions that we don't know. We just say blanket, across the board, no matter what, sugar is bad even if it's 1 gram. No. It is not that simple. The carbohydrates you eat are converted to glucose in your bloodstream. So where's the problem? Okay. Now you could, and I didn't get into it in here because, again, the article was going to get too big. You could get into the guts, and hey, you're going to have an argument there. But again, we still do, right? Your intestinal health, your digestive health. We still don't know how much, and it's not going to be broad and the same for everybody. Again, you got a 180-pound linebacker on the football team, or you've got, a 115-pound librarian. Not the same. So we can't just say, well, it's 10 grams or it's 100 grams or it's 30 grams, right? The context of the individual matters. All right, back to the article. I knew I was going to get fired up today. Second context here, present day physiology. Of course, that's what I rambled on about. The size of the person, how much tissue they have, affects their capacity to process energy, affecting how foods affect them. A 120-pound librarian and a 240-pound linebacker are not going to have the same metabolic response to a Snickers or a piece of cake. Other things to consider: age, sex, fitness level, hydration levels. For every gram of stored carbohydrate, it takes 3 grams of water to do so. Previous night's sleep and stress levels can all affect how well you will process that Snickers. Also, your current diet has an impact. When we consume carbohydrates, we get better at processing and utilizing carbohydrates, all things being equal. I know there was at least one study done. I don't know if I'm not sure. One study was done, and what they found was that when they restricted carbohydrates and then reintroduced them, people had a harder time processing and digesting carbohydrates. Their blood sugar was a little bit more dysregulated. But after a couple weeks, oh my God, the body figured out how to process those carbohydrates and utilize them more efficiently. Go figure. Anyways. The reason I'm fired up is because I'm fired up, but also, I don't know if I was going to say this. I'm not going to say it. There's just a lot of people out there that say their opinion, and that's what it is, like it's a fact, and they're having influence on people, and it just bugs me. And I mean, like, the influencers. Anyways, all right. Back to the article. Third, your activity level and nutrition status. Nutrition status, thinking about generally, there's a typo. Nutrition status, thinking about it generally in terms of energy, is greatly impacted by our energy expenditure. In other words, how much did we move that day compared to how much did we eat? If we don't do much that day, our nutrition status is probably going to be even, not up or down, balanced. It's when we start getting active that we can get into a negative energy balance. This is why we use the examples from earlier, running a marathon or 90 minutes of hot yoga. Activity impacts our nutrition status. Being in a deficit allows room, in quotations, for a Snickers since our glycogen levels, stored carbohydrates, and energy overall would be in a deficit. In essence, a Snickers has a place to go as opposed to floating around in the bloodstream. And I wrote for a day, like all down the details of that, but again, decided to take it out for time purposes. Okay, so we're basically covering 4 different contexts here. I'll read the last one. And lastly, also an example from above, what did you eat the Snickers with? Nothing at all, or a steak and salad? The combinations of foods we eat have an effect on how the meal is digested, potentially slowing it down. When digestion is slow, absorption is as well. For example, fats take longer to digest than carbs. When we eat carbs with fats, digestion slows, slowing the absorption of the carbs. Proteins and vegetables generally take longer to digest as well. The more slowly the food is absorbed, the easier it is for your body to regulate the energy coming in, keeping things under control. Things like blood sugar when eating a Snickers. This kind of falls under the poisons in the dose thing as well, but it's different than quantity. It's right. It's how much carbohydrate or how much is my blood glucose going to go up based on the duration of time that I take it in, right? And so when you eat, if you eat a Snickers with a steak and a salad, that meal is going to take a long time to digest. Therefore, the energy getting released into your bloodstream is going to be slower. So is the Snickers bad in that situation? Is it bad when you're starving to death? No. Okay. So, I'm fired up about this because we got to add more nuance and more intelligence to our thinking. Good and bad is a place to start. And I'm going to write an article about that. But I think anybody listening to this podcast is a little bit beyond the good and bad, right? And they need to add these nuances in. And I'm going to go into there's a little bit of let's be clear. So, you know what? I'm just going to read the article. Back to the article. Little secondary topic here. So we're out of the context section, and we're on to the let's be clear section. This is titled. Before we wrap this up, to keep our viewpoint level, let's cover some context in which a Snickers may not be a good idea. Oh, look at that. There's a typo. There's no period at the end of that. Embarrassing. In order to be able to eat Snickers and not have a negative impact, a person has to have a healthy metabolism. You can't have an unhealthy metabolism and think that because you are in a negative energy balance, a Snickers is a good idea. Your metabolism most likely won't respond well to it because your metabolism isn't responding well in general. How do you know if you have a healthy metabolism? A good start, but not a guarantee, is to check your blood sugar first thing in the morning before eating. Do this for a week. It should be under or around 90 on average. If you don't want to take your blood sugar, things should generally, but not always, run well when someone is exercising 4 days a week or more and eating a balanced diet. That's just total random guess, though. I mean, if you took 100 of those people, 100 people that weren't doing that, you're going to see more regulation and a healthier metabolism in those people. But on an individual level, that's no guarantee. Blood sugar is going to be really good. Getting a full metabolic panel will be better. Your doctor should be doing these things. Back to the article. For the most part, metabolism will not be running well when sedentary or poorly nourished. If you'd like to learn more about metabolism, subscribe to be notified when more content becomes available. Okay. Another example of when it might not be a good idea to have a Snickers. If weight loss or losing body fat is your main objective, Snickers may not be the best option at the moment. It's a good idea to avoid perturbations in glucose levels as best you can until your weight and or body fat are where you'd like them to be, right? So the Snickers could potentially be raising your blood sugar. If you want to get a keto mojo and check your blood glucose after you're eating a Snickers to see what's going on, that'd be great. But if you're going to push your blood sugar up, generally speaking, that's going to raise insulin, and that's going to push nutrients into muscle tissue and fat tissue, which if it's pushing it into the fat tissue, that means most likely it's not burning it or pulling it out of fat tissue. So you're going to stop any kind of fat stop. You're going to slow fat utilization from your body, which if your goal is to lose body fat, you don't really want to do that. So if you are in a situation where, hey, you know what, my fitness is important, but right now I'm going to prioritize for now, getting this body fat off, then maybe the Snickers isn't a good idea. When it comes time in the spring, I usually stop eating them. If I do eat one, it's almost always after a workout. Glycogen levels need to be replenished. And so Snickers is super easy. It's not very hard to digest. I have my protein shake and I'm back in the game pretty quick. Sometimes I feel a little funny after that. We talked about that on the podcast with Taylor. Okay. Another example when it might not be a good idea. Gut health is critical to overall health. If you have food sensitivities and a Snickers negatively affects your gut, you should avoid them. Full stop. If it's doing something to your guts, you just shouldn't eat it, right? You have to prioritize your gut health. It is super critical. Now, if your guts are doing great and you don't have any digestive issues and you're exercising regularly, you know what? Ain't nothing wrong with Snickers from what I can tell, okay? And lastly, but not exhaustively, they can't be the foundation of your nutrition. I had in here. This goes without saying, but I took that out. You will miss critical nutrients needed to be healthy. They would need to be eaten with a balanced diet, not be a diet. I think this is obvious, but let's not make any assumptions. Oh, that's how I wrapped it up. That was pretty obvious, but, got to be careful what you're saying these days. That is for sure. Oh, I need a drink. My God. That's the button I wanted to hit. Liquid death. I know those sounds get your attention, so I'll be hitting them. All right, let's wrap this up. Back to the article. The section's called Wrap It Up. And then I say, let's wrap this up with a couple of thoughts. Just a couple of thoughts to leave you with here in the article. And then I'm also going to leave you with some final thoughts for the podcast. Lots of thoughts for you today. If we label food as bad and someone eats it, are they bad or feel they are bad? Or the opposite. If it is labeled good, are they good or feel good when they eat them? Have we inadvertently attached moral judgments to people by attaching moral judgments to food without realizing it? Maybe that's why people get so fired up, even religious, about their diets. Well, food for thought there. That is going to happen, right? If you live in the world of these foods are good and these foods are bad, you're going to feel bad when you eat those foods. And you're probably going to feel good when you eat the good foods. That's not good. Don't do that. How about appropriate or inappropriate? How about within the context? How about what does my body need right now, right? If I'm super low on carbohydrates, I haven't had a lot of carbohydrates that day. Listen, carbohydrates ain't bad for you. Contrary to what a lot of people are telling you right now, carbohydrates are not bad. I'm going to write an article on essential and critical to help differentiate why. Because there's people out there using the fact that carbohydrates aren't essential, meaning you don't have to eat them in your diet to survive, which means we don't need them, apparently, is their conclusion, which is an illogical conclusion. Because what really happens is your body always produces glucose, which means it's critical. Carbohydrates aren't essential, they're critical, meaning if you don't have any in your bloodstream, you're dead. Your brain doesn't function without them. Ever. The entire time you're here. So you can't say that you don't need them because your body thinks it's so important to your body that it actually makes it. Okay. Anyways, all kind of fired up. And the second thought I'll leave you with in the article, we need to take more time to understand one of the most important on the level of breathing things that we will ever do. We will feed ourselves just about every day, multiple times a day, the entire time we are here on this planet. Labeling foods as good or bad, especially when done outside the context of the individual, is too simplistic. Food is not good or bad. It is a tool to provide nutrition. Teaching people about nutrition, what their body needs to function optimally, is what we need to do. Then we can choose any food we would like to do that, right? When you understand nutrition, you understand what your body needs and what it needs, what you need to feed it. Then you can choose any food you want to do that and be okay with any potential negative consequences or the positives or whatever, right? I'm not basing my decision on what I eat based on the food necessarily. I'm basing it on what my body needs, which it needs about 180 grams of protein. It needs about 250 to 300 grams of carbohydrate, and it needs about 80 grams of fat, okay? That's what it needs. I get my micronutrients from a multivitamin and a salad, eating vegetables. Bam. I'm going to talk about that in a second, okay? But I get to choose whatever foods I want to do that with. If I want to do that with Snickers, I'm going to do it with Snickers. But I'm not because I'm not going to feel good. And I couldn't get enough protein. It wouldn't be balanced. All right. Thanks for reading. I hope it added value to your thinking. If it did, consider subscribing. It is much appreciated. All right. So that's wrapping up the article. Hopefully we're still recording here. I always feel the need to check this. In the middle of it. Oh, we're back to 1. That's so good. We're doing great here. Final thoughts, guys. More reading for you. Final thoughts. There are a ton of well-intended people giving out oversimplified information on nutrition. When we consider the fact that simple ideas create clarity, which we know reduces anxiety and increases motivation, this makes sense. They strongly believe, so they want to share. But simple does not always mean best. You know, this is something we've talked about a ton on this podcast, right? Like, this is what we're trying to do when we educate ourselves. We're trying to get clarity around a situation. Simple generally provides clarity, right? Like, because when things are clear, we understand them, it reduces our anxiety and increases our motivation. Hopefully you understand that by now. So what's going on with people is they're like, oh, I get it. All I have to eat is X. All I have to do is paleo. All I have to do is carnivore. All I have to do is vegan, right? Simple. Now they're motivated. Their anxiety drops around food. They know what they can eat, and they start eating it. Let me say that making any change to your diet that is at least you're going to learn from the experience, okay? But simple in this situation does not mean accurate, okay? And we need to add more, just a little bit more nuance. It's not more complicated. It's not super complicated, but there is some complication, right? Like, you got to know how many I think I write it right here. All right. Back to there's 3 final thoughts on here for the episode here. I'm basically already rolling on it. Okay. Nutrition is not complicated, but it's not as simple as assigning foods as good or bad. In my estimation, a good nutrition plan accounts for the amount of macronutrients, micronutrients, and plant fiber meaning you are getting enough of those things to support optimal function. That's good nutrition. In my estimation, I think that, and this could change, but man, I've been thinking about nutrition since I was 21. It's 28 years. Okay, 28 years. I've been down the low fat road. I've been down the eat the fat road. I've been down to get the protein in road. I've been down the paleo road. I did the SCD diet. I've done fasting. I've eaten in multiple different ways over the past 28 years. And I've done no vegetables. I've concluded that what we need to do is get the right amount of macronutrients in, proteins, carbs, and fats, the right amount of micronutrients in, and plant fiber. Because your intestinal health seems to me to be dirt. It seems to be an evolution from and I want to write about this at a point because I want to dig into it deep. This is just a theory right now and just my idea of what I think is happening with our intestinal health. But if you look at the soil composition of good, healthy soil, it's got a bunch of microbes, it's got a bunch of good bacteria, it's got a bunch of enzymes in there, and that stuff is breaking down the plant fiber that is falling from the trees onto the ground or the bushes or the whatever and recirculating that, and that's healthy soil, okay? And what I think our guts are is a mimic of that, a duplication of that, different but same, that's inside us. And it's not dirt, it's different, but it's got good bacteria and it's got microbes and it's got enzymes and it's got these things in there, and they're breaking down the plant matter that's coming in and the other things that are coming in and using that stuff that isn't pulled through the bloodstream to I don't say restock, but to refeed the gut health that's in there. That's just how it seems to me. So macronutrients, micronutrients, and plant fiber, okay? Get it in. You take care of your gut health. When your gut health is good, you can eat a much wider variety of foods and be good to go, okay? You got to get your macronutrients in, your micronutrients in to make sure your cells are being fed what they need, your muscle tissue, your brain tissue, your nervous tissue, all your tissues are getting the amino acids and the fatty acids that they need to duplicate properly, and you get in enough energy so you're not constantly in a negative energy balance and restricting your output and your body's ability to adapt and all these other things that go along with it. That's what nutrition looks like to me at this point. Okay. Last final thought here. The blog article I'm currently working on will break down nutritional approaches into 3 categories. Oh yeah, this is kind of like a thought that I had like a month ago, and I'm like, oh, this makes sense. So let me just read this real quick and I'll comment on it. The blog article I'm currently working on will break down nutritional approaches into 3 categories: beginner, intermediate, and advanced, and then explain how each category should be matched to the individual's experience level. Each approach can then be progressed through as the individual improves in their skills and abilities. What I came to realize was, because I'd always bashed the bad food and the good food approach to nutrition, but what I came to realize is it's simple, and people who aren't skilled or developed in their discipline, their ability to guide their biology, right? Because biology is trying to do something, and our minds, us, the thing that's inside the biology is trying to do something, right? You're trying to do something, right? You're looking out in the future and going, I want to be a healthy person. I want my body to look like this. I want these things. But if you've never even attempted to change your nutrition before, you're a noob, you're a you're a beginner, well, starting with macronutrients and meal preparation and all that stuff is going to be way advanced because you're just not used to disciplining your biology. So what I realized was what I think is good or will be helpful for people is if, hey, you've never done this before, here's a basic approach to nutrition. Let's get you good at that. Let you work on that and, get your teeth kicked in and get back up and work on developing your capacity to control your biology, keep it from eating certain things, so we could maybe a good food, bad food approach is good in the beginning. But after some time, you get more advanced, you get more capable, then we can build in these next 2 steps in nutrition in. And so I'm going to write about that. That is the next blog article. So I'm pretty excited about getting time, which I don't get a lot of, So basically my life right now is I have to get everything in order and everything has to be running good. And then I get some time to work on a blog article, and it's always last. And what I would love to do is be able to have that first so I could actually get stuff out at a much faster clip. But that's just not my life right now. I'm working on getting it there. So super excited about getting that article out. Next episode, TBD, to be announced. I don't know what I'm doing on the next episode from next week. I would say if you have suggestions, let me know. But you won't see this till after I've already cut it. This is how the system works right now. So anyways, help us grow. Like and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. Any of those is fine with me. I'm no longer just pushing the YouTube. We're going to make some shifts there. And yeah, that's it, guys. Appreciate you listening. If you do have any questions, please submit them to dennis@dennisfenrich.com. And again, thanks for listening. We will talk with you guys soon. Have a great week. Bye.